Welcome to Heian Haven. I'm Dawn. Today we're discussing Chapter 15 of the Tale of Genji, Yomogiu. We'll start with our usual summary for shared context. The focus for this chapter is Suematsu Kencho, also known as Princess Hitachi or Princess Safflower. Genji's support is all that sustains her household, as her father has died. When Genji became distracted by his own woes, his support stopped, and all through his exile, no support came to the princess. Her servants tried to convince her to sell her property or some of her possessions, but she refused. Her villa was falling to ruin and engulfed in weeds. During a windstorm, a gallery and the servants' quarters were destroyed. Servants left. The kitchen fires went cold. The princess lived a miserable existence. Her aunt tried to convince her to visit, wishing she would serve her daughters, but Princess Hitachi refused out of shyness. The aunt's husband received a promotion in rank, and she tried to convince the princess to join her in the provinces. The princess did not reply. Genji was pardoned and returned to the capital, but he sent no word to the princess, and her misery increased. The aunt again tried to convince her niece to leave. Her servants wished she would listen, but to no avail. Jiju, the daughter of the princess's nurse, would soon be leaving for the provinces, and also could not convince her mistress to leave. Genji's rite of the 8 lectures is held, and the princess's brother attends, then brings this news to her. She falls deeper into despair. The aunt provides the princess with gifts and tries one last time to convince her niece to go, but is met again with refusal. She leaves, taking Jiju with her. The princess spends a miserable winter alone. In the 4th month, Genji decides to visit Hanachiru Sato, the lady at the Villa of Falling Flowers, and happens by the Hitachi villa. He stops and sends Koremitsu in to inquire. He then braves the dewy tangle of weeds to visit the princess. Genji begins to once again take care of Suematsu Kencho, repairing her villa and providing for her needs and sending servants. After 2 years, he moves her to the newly constructed villa adjacent to Nijo. Chapter 15 takes place over a period of years, covering just after the relationship had begun. This is a callback to Chapter 6, to well after Genji's return from exile. This chapter, more so than others, has the feel of a letter, especially with the closing paragraph where our narrator claims to have a headache, but will continue the story at a later date. Let's compare our translations starting with the title. We have 2-ish categories: titles that focus on the weeds, this would be Overgrown Mugwort by Suematsu, and Seidensticker's The Wormwood Patch, and those that let us know there is a building involved, Waley's The Palace in the Tangled Woods, and A Ruined Villa of Tangled Gardens by Washburn. Tyler gives us a subtle version of the latter category with A Waste of Weeds. That waste applies equally to the villa and the garden. Tyler's chapter page states, Yomogiu means a ruined house with grounds overgrown by plants like Yomogi, Artemisia vulgaris, weeds. There's also the difference between mugwort and wormwood, but in reading about the plants, they're nearly identical, one having silver on the top of its leaves and green below, and the other the reverse. It's an interesting choice, but just for clarity, mugwort is more correct. As for this chapter, all of our translators tell essentially the same tale, which is how it should be, but we're specifically interested in the minor differences and the similarities, so let's dig in. First, a similarity. All of our translators give a description of Genji's support, making the princess feel as though the very stars were reflected or had fallen into a bowl of water. What a lovely image. I like these similarities because, as I've said before, they make me feel like I've really heard what Murasaki Shikbu meant in that instance. And I had that feeling more and more as I read each of the translators. It was as though the story was being refined for me. Yes, a feeling I've had before, but even more so in this chapter. Next, in the Hitachi villa, the earthen wall surrounding the property has collapsed and been trampled by cattle as herd boys allow their beasts to wander through the overgrown garden. All 4 of our later translators give us that description, but Suematsu says that in spring and summer, boys are playing in the garden. An intriguing difference lies in the description of the fall of hair the princess gives Jiju as a memento for her long years of service. Waley and Washburn say the length of hair is braided. I seriously doubt this, and our other translations do not support it. I have yet to find any evidence whatsoever that there was any kind of braiding of hair going on for noblewomen. Hair at the time was worn long, straight, and parted in the middle. Sometimes it would be gathered into essentially a low ponytail at the nape of the neck, and sometimes it would be bound in several places down the length of the hair. No braiding or plaiting. I'm of course open to seeing evidence of hair braiding, should someone know of any. There is also a little disagreement over the length of this fall of hair. Most say 9 feet, but Waley says 7. One last difference, and this is really a printing error. My copy of Seidensticker has a place, 2 actually, in this chapter, where a line from a previous chapter has been inserted. This line refers to hair in a page boy style, which is a bit of a line from chapter 14 during Genji's pilgrimage to Sumiyoshi. These insertion mistakes are kind of wild. And now for just an odd choice. Washburn uses the word wheedling twice in this chapter, once in reference to the princess's servants while trying to get her to sell either her property or her furnishings, and the other by her aunt. I just found it odd that he chose the same word and such a striking standout word twice. He did this in the last chapter as well with the phrase, or compound word, lèse-majesté. When you're reading specifically for differences like I am, word choices like that tend to pop out when you come across them. I also listen to Washburn's translation on repeat when I can, replaying the chapter over and over, not the whole tale. Those 2 word choices caught my ear, every time. There are 2 seasonal references I'd like to look at. First is the frosty month, being the 11th month according to Waley. My go-to resource for period calendar and time, Sengoku Daimyo, calls the 11th month Shimotsuki, or frost month. Our translators all include something about snow, sleet, or frost in their translations of the passage. Second, the Kamo festival near the start of summer. Tyler's general glossary gives this definition of the Kamo festival. Kamo no Matsuri, the annual festival of the 2 Kamo shrines, Upper Kamo and Lower Kamo, along the Kamo River to the north of the city. It was held on the middle day of the bird in the 4th month. On that day, a grand procession went from the palace to call at both shrines, providing a brilliant spectacle for the people at large. It was also known as the Aoi festival because for the occasion people decked their headdresses, carriages, and so on with aoi leaves, sacred to Kamo. Modernly, the Kamo festival is held on the 15th of May, which actually aligns with the lunar calendar and the middle of the 4th month. I highly recommend the video of the procession from Discover Kyoto, link in the description below. To entertain herself, Princess Hitachi reads old illuminated tales. The 3 mentioned are Kara Mori, Hakoya no Toji, and Kaguya Hime. Kaguya Hime, also known as the bamboo cutter, is the only one of the 3 stories to survive. We have an insight into the politics of rank in the rigidly rank-conscious court. It's clearly laid out that marrying a Zuryo, or provincial governor, is considered marrying down for the aunt of a princess and something that she was ostracized for. The late prince and his wife wanted nothing to do with her. Fascinating. Waley refers to the princess's brother as a Zen priest, but the others do not specify. Zen came to Japan long before our tale is set, so it's entirely possible. I just find the translation difference one of those tiny treats we get as we compare the translations. Was he a Zen priest? I'd find it surprising if Murasaki Shikibu wrote such, and none of the other translators provided that. This may be an insertion. And while her brother is a Buddhist monk or priest, Princess Hitachi herself refuses to even touch a rosary or call Amida's name. Tyler's footnote tells us that during her father's time, Buddhism was considered too serious a subject for women, and unladylike. Things are obviously different in the present of the tale, as we see prominent court ladies taking vows and becoming Buddhist nuns, the Rokuju lady, and especially Fujitsubo being examples of this. If the former empress can take vows, there's no way it's considered unladylike. Let's talk about our clothing references. In Waley's translation, we're told that during Genji's exile, some women were privileged to busy their needles upon such garments as his altered state prescribed. We're going to talk about the Kariginu in just a moment, but as an example, these ladies, likely Murasaki and the gentlewomen at Nijo, as expressed by other translators, would have made new garments, including Kariginu, for Genji. His previous ones would have been of brocade, indicating his rank. These new ones would be of plain cloth, a plain weave and of simple dyestuffs with no embellishments, reflecting Genji's altered state. We're given another instance of narrow sleeves being linked to poverty. Washburn describes the princess as someone whose prospects were as narrow as the sleeves she wore. From sleeves to pants. When Koremitsu leads Genji towards Princess Hitachi, the legs of their gathered trousers were soaked with dew. Genji is in his usual outfit for going out, his disguise. This is a hunting cloak. This is where we're getting back to Kariginu. Tyler defines a hunting cloak as kari no onzo, kariginu, an outer garment originally worn for hunting and then adopted by the nobles as everyday and formal wear. The hunting cloak has cords laced through the sleeves to allow them to be gathered at the wrist, and it has sleeves semi-detached from the body of the garment for ease of movement. It was worn with gathered trousers, sashinuki, or hunting trousers, garibagama, and a hat, iboshi. A gentleman normally wore a hunting cloak while traveling, and his attendants would wear it even when he was in court dress, no shisugata. He also might wear it as a disguise. Here's an image of a kariginu. This particular one was preserved as a no costume. The sleeves are only attached to the top back of the shoulders, and the sides are left open when constructed. You may notice that this is not the typical crossover garment like a kosude or modern kimono. The collar is a round standing collar closed with a frog. You can see the remnants of Chinese influence on dress in this collar element. I've included a link in the description down below to a resource for further reading about this garment. And finally, we have 3 examples of gifts in this chapter. The support from Genji pre-exile, a dress presented to the princess by her aunt, and the gifts that were presented to Genji for the Kamo festival that he then distributed to Hanachiro Sato and Suetsumu Hana and his other ladies. I really enjoyed this chapter. I listened to it more than a dozen times, and each time it held my attention and I discovered something else related to my research. What stood out for you in this chapter? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Join me next time for Chapter 16, Sekiya. Subscribe if you'd like to explore the Heian period of Japan with me through the Tale of Genji.